Hey guys, my name is Riccardo Mattea. I am an Italian naturalist and photographer, and today I want to review this new lens by Venus Optics, also known as Laowa. It's the new 90mm f2.8 2:1 macro. It's an amazing lens. Today we're gonna test it in the field, but before I want to show you how this lens looks like in the office. Okay, so as promised, here's the new Laowa 90mm f2.8 2:1 macro. The packaging by Venus Optics looks neat and minimalistic as usual, and there you go. This is what's inside of it. Overall, it feels great in the hand. It has no electronic coupling, so it's a fully manual operating lens, which in my opinion is totally fine for macro photography, especially when using flash. This is a full frame lens. It's designed for mirrorless cameras and its aperture ranges from f2.8 to f22. The angle of view is 27 degrees. It has 13 elements and 10 groups, and it has 13 aperture blades. The minimum focusing distance is 20.5 centimeters, which I think is great because it allows you to move in flashes and light modifiers, and you have enough space to work with the subject. Of course, it's a 2:1 magnification lens, and it weighs just about 619 grams. The mounts that are going to be available are E-mount, R-mount, Z-mount, and L-mount. Since I own the Sony 90mm, I wanted to show them to you side by side, and you can already see that the two have some major differences. The body of the Laowa feels more premium as it's made out of metal, reason for which it is also slightly heavier. The Sony, on the other hand, it's a little bit longer. One obvious difference is that the Sony works both in autofocus and manual focus, and it has weather sealing. Nowadays, I don't really think these aforementioned features matter that much. Why? Well, because macro photography involves a lot of manual focusing, and the durability of the lens at the end of the day depends mostly on how you treat it, not how weatherproof it is, because dust can get even into the most weather-sealed lenses or camera bodies. For what I can tell, sharpness-wise, the lenses are very similar and can produce extremely detailed images. But the Laowa can get you to 2 times macro, and I think this is a winning point for any real macro photographers. To conclude, if I have to give a personal opinion on which lens to get between the two, I would say the Laowa. A, because it gets you to 2:1 magnification, and B, because for the price of the Sony, and I really love that lens, you can actually get 2 Laowa lenses. So I would think about it. Okay, now let's go back to the field and test it out. Okay, in this case, I decided to come to this location because I knew I was gonna find orchids, and here they are. There's 2 different species, Ophrys sphegodes and then Anacamptis morio, 2 very common ones, but nevertheless beautiful. For the shooting, I decided to use a multi-flash setup. One is mounted on a tripod, the other one on my bracket, so I can control a little bit more of the light. Then of course we have the 90mm from Laowa, Sony a7 IV, and then I have a Nissin Air 10S trigger coupled to my 2 Nissin flashes. Right, so let's get into it and photograph the first orchid. The first shot we're gonna take, it's gonna be at 1:1 magnification, f11, ISO 100. Okay. Nice and dark background, but I want a little bit more light in, so I'm gonna drop the shutter speed to 1/100th of a second. It was 1/250th before. Let's try again. Okay, nice and sharp. We're ready at f11. The depth of field is great at 1:1 magnification. I'd say we can also push it to f16. In this case, then we have to drop the shutter speed a bit more because we need more light in if we don't want a black background. So now we are at 1/10 of a second, and honestly, because I'm using the flashes, it's fine to drop it to 1/10. As long as your hand is stable, of course. You can also help yourself by placing the bracket on the floor. Of course, be careful not to kill the orchids around you. And let's give it another shot. Even better. Now, I tried to shoot at 2:1 magnification, but the problem is that the flower is too big to fit in the frame, so it gets cropped out. My solution is to move around the flower, try a different composition to fit the whole flower in at 2:1 magnification so I can show you what it looks like. Nice. Okay, now let's move around it and change a little bit the perspective of the photo. I'm gonna take a shot from the front of the flower at 2:1 macro and then back at 1:1 to show you the difference between the two settings. So look, nice and sharp where I decided to put the focus on. And back to 1:1 magnification to show you the difference. There you go. Nice. Okay, orchid in focus. Perfect. Let's move on to the next subject. Okay, now we moved on to the second species. It's the Anacamptis morio. It's a very beautiful orchid as well, with a purple coloration. For this, I am going to go for a black background because it looks much more elegant. And again, we are going to start at 1:1 macro f16. Okay, very nice. And then we're gonna move on to 2:1 macro, focusing only on one single flower. Okay, now that we've taken some sample shots with this lens here, let's go home and review the images. But just because I'm Italian, I need to have a coffee first. Okay, now we are back in the office and I want to show you some more pictures that I took throughout these days, and I'll let you judge how they look. Okay, now I want to show you the difference between 1:1 magnification and 2:1 magnification. The picture on the left is 1:1 magnification, and on the right you have 2:1. On the left we have an aperture of f16, and on the right we have an aperture of f11. I try to keep the exposure at the same level. So if we zoom in on both, we can see that, of course, the photo that is at 1:1 magnification, it's much sharper than the one that's at 2:1 magnification. And this is because when you get closer to a subject, you start getting more diffraction. That's just the physics of macro photography, really, of what happens inside the lens. So nothing wrong with that. Is something that we just have to accept, unless you want to do focus stacking. But as you can see, it's really sharp. I really like the detail that it's in both of the images. Of course, the depth of field is very narrow on the photo to the right, but I don't see it as a problem again. For me, it just makes the image more three-dimensional. Moving on to another shot of the orchid. This time we have the 2:1 magnification on the left, and the right one is the 1:1 magnification. Again, let's zoom in. Very sharp, very detailed images. Bear in mind we are zoomed in at 66.7%. I'm gonna go at 50% because I think that's enough. And there you go. You can judge yourself, but I think there's a lot of detail in the parts that are in focus. Moving on to another orchid. Here we have left 2:1, right 1:1. Again, let's zoom in. Both images are extremely sharp. Let's look at the 2:1 magnification. Great detail presented, and of course the 1:1, it's even sharper. I think this lens could potentially be sharper than the Sony 90mm. And now let's look at some shots I took at night. For example, this one here. A shot I took of a snail. It was wet, it was moist, but look at the detail on this. Amazing, right? You can see all the hairs around the shell. You can see all the warts on the snail body, and on the 2:1 magnification, again, great detail. This was, I believe, shot at f16 and f11 for the 2:1 magnification. And then let's look at two shots I took this morning of a bee. This is slightly overexposed, but I kind of liked how this bee looked in the middle of these flowers. Again, super sharp image, narrow depth of field on the 2:1 magnification, but it retains a lot of detail. And now I want to show you real quick a sequence of 3 images. So one is at 1:1 magnification. There it is. Amazing detail retained in this image. Honestly, I am really pleased. This image here is shot at 2:1 magnification. Let's zoom in. And again, huge amount of detail. There you go. Really incredible. You can see the pollen grains, you can see all the hairs. And this was shot just for fun at 3:1 magnification. A little bit more diffraction. This was in body crop on my A7 IV, which has a 33 megapixel sensor. So there it is. Let me know what you think. I think this lens is pretty amazing.